in many situations in our life, we want to relate one thing, one magnitude, one measurement, or any structure that you have with another. And this is what we call a relation. And in relations, something that obviously we relate, we take into account that one of these things that we relate is like the one who tells you what to do with the other. So today we're going to learn about functions and how functions are related with these situations that you have in your life that gets you to some conclusions. So let's see. First, what is a relation? So when you have two things, whatever things you have, and you can relate one with the other, we say that we have a relation. Okay? Now, the independent variables, these independent magnitudes that you measure to test or to find out the dependent magnitudes, the independent magnitudes are calling the domain. And the dependent magnitudes are calling the range. So in any relation, we have a set of variables. One set is calling the domain and the other set is calling the range. The domain is like the independent, the one that tells you what's going to happen to the range. But it's just one type of relations in which one element of the domain goes to one element of the range. So let's imagine that we have here many elements and one element of the domain goes to one element of the range. Look at that, it can go to the same element of the range. Doesn't matter. But when this happens, we say that we have a function. So a function is a relation in which one element of the domain corresponds to one element of the range, to only one element of the range. For example, let's say that we're using a linear function. So let's say that you're using a linear function just multiplying times 3. So if you have 1 multiplies times 3, you get 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. Look at that, one element of the domain goes to one element of the range. So this is calling a function. On the other hand, let's say that we use another structure. Let's say that we have a set 3, 4, and 5. And here we have the set 7, 8, and 9. And we say that 3 goes to 7 and 8, 4 goes to 8, and 5 goes to 9. Observe that in this case, this element of the domain goes to two elements of the range. So this is not a function. This is what we call a relation. Now, in terms of functions, there are some ideas of how to get the domain and the range. For example, in this case, we have the set of numbers that corresponds to one set of the range. We can put it like in coordinate form: 1, 3, 2, 6, 3, 9. Now, in this case, we have that the domain is only the set 1, 2, 3, and the range is the set 3, 6, 9. Okay, this is something that we can do when we have the information of the domain and the range. Now, which other ideas or in how other ways we can calculate the domain and the range? Because there could be many other ways, There could be many forms, many ways to determine the domain and the range. Now, but in this case, we need to just understand that when you have a relation, we can put it in set form, just in the way you just saw, or we can put it in a graph, or you can put it in terms of an algebraic expression or a formula. So, now, we're going to see a graph, and I would like that you pause the video and try to identify what will be the domain and what will be the range. So in this time, you can see this graph, the graph that it shows with a green line, solid line, and try to identify what will be the domain and what will be the range. Pause the video if you want. Now, what will be the domain and what will be the range? So remember, the domain will be the set of elements of the independent variable. If you remember, the independent variable goes in the x-axis and the dependent variable goes in the y-axis. So as you can see, the independent variable in this case goes, or the values that are expected for x goes from -infinite until -1, and then from 1 to infinite. So in this function, we can see that one element of the domain goes to one element of the range. So therefore, we can say that the domain is from -infinite to -1 and from 1 to infinite. How to write it in set form? So in this case, we're going to write it in set form as x defined as all the x that are less than -1, less than or equal to -1, and all the x that are greater than or equal to 1. This is how we define the domain. Now, how to get the range? You want to get the range, observe that there is no negative numbers on my function, only goes for positive numbers. So if you only have positive numbers, we can say that the range is all the positive numbers. So the range is all the positive numbers. The numbers y, in a way that y is greater than or equals to 0. All the positive numbers and 0. So it means that we have the positive real numbers. Now, this is the way we can declare or identify the domain and the range by using a graph. If you have a graph, this is what is expected that you can do to identify domain and range. Look at that this is a function, because for one element of the domain, for one element of x, I have only one element of y. It's different from this function. I'm going to write another relation here. For example, I'm going to write the relation y squared equals 3x. So you can see it here in black. And look at that, for one element of the domain, for one, I have two elements of range. This is a relation, but it's not a function. Okay? So in this short video, you just understand what is the idea of a function, how to understand functions, what is the idea of a function, and how to identify the domain and the range of different functions. Now, it's time for you to think how to do it with a graph. Imagine that you have this graph. Imagine that you have this graph. Imagine that you have the graph of y equals the square root of x minus 1. Now, if you observe this graph, what will be the domain and what will be the range? And this is up for today. Think what you do, write in the comments, what did you get? What will be the domain and the range of this function by using the graph? And we're going to see in the next video how to get domain and range when you have equations. This is the idea of the next video. See you in the next video. Bye bye.